patient names, right? They're going to be seen here. Let's just turn this way. Boom. How are we on live streaming? Reset. We're good?
Yeah, for the Twitch. Perfect.
Alrighty. What episode are we on today?
Face painters.
The face painter.
3.
All right. Where would the group like to start? Seinfeld's The Face Painter.
I mean, I think we can start with Mr. Devil Face Painting the Preacher.
Buddy, what did you see?
I mean, I don't really know how to interpret the reaction of the preacher, potentially, obviously a preacher, even an average person would react to somebody with face paint in the manner that the preacher did, even if it was done for comedic effect. I feel like maybe there's some potential prior history that could cause him to react that sharply.
Not only the rapid response, but evidently, and maybe there was a couple of words that were owed to this, and a bit later in the episode, I think he went back to South America or Central America, but the sustained response too. Now, having said that, and there's a nice parallel here. We're probably going to start, if not stay, at the initial point of discussion, which is always brought to this table, and that is any behavior we see is normal until proven otherwise, right? That's the way we collectively agreed to train our brain in interacting with people in general, and as psychologists and psychiatrists in particular. And here we have a culture where this is completely appropriate and it's culturally relative. I'm not so sure there's much beyond that. But that conversation, I think, parallels Putty himself quite nicely. Anybody here ever paint their face before? The camera's not anybody. So we have a few face painters in here. All right. So was it sports related or Friday nights at the Backyard Picture Show? I mean, what do you got going on here? There are some places in which it is absolutely appropriate. And those places could be either time or geographically boundaried, meaning that if you step outside, you might get a look or two, like Putty gets. But for sports fandom, that is a subculture, especially within the United States, and for hockey purposes, Canada, that it's acceptable. And again, very similar to the priest himself. Probably not much more to say about it other than to respect the culture, or in this case, the subculture, right? I just thought of it, and there was some minor planning, but obviously things had to break right. The fact that Putty's wearing the New Jersey Devils jersey, by the way, what number was he wearing? Couldn't have been 86, right? I mean, just because Jack Hughes did score the winning goal over the weekend, just perfect timing for our discussion. Any other thoughts about Putty? Yeah, I'm going to take this one step further. What if you remove the rest of the group post game, walking through Manhattan, walking through Midtown, and only had so you remove everybody from the scene, and you have Putty and Kramer going at it after the game. As a third person observing this, what might be your initial thoughts? And let's make the setting neutral. So no face paint, no jersey, neutral stimuli. I mean, I think anytime you see two people jawing at each other, there's a tendency to think that the interaction is aversive, right?
Yeah.
But then when you add the additional information in terms of context, that completely changes. It's completely normal for two people, even friends, to be talking like that to each other after a game, especially when one is a Rangers fan and the other is a world champion New Jersey Devils fan. Remember, this was actually filmed in the 90s when the Devils had their dynasty with Martin Brodeur, right? So If I'm triggering any Ranger fans out there, that's by intent, so hang in there with me. All right, what else you got? Actually, let me take this one step further too, which really has little to nothing to do with the episode, but it certainly opens the door. I want to know from you, your thoughts, distinguish what a culturally sanctioned behavior is versus a culturally bound syndrome. All right, so that's we could certainly get into a discussion of these relative terms. So culturally sanctioned behavior is exactly what we've been describing up to this point. It's a behavior that is sanctioned by a particular culture or even a subculture, right? If you, I know I didn't assign this, but if you wanted to watch The Skeleton Key, an incredibly underrated movie, boy, does it bring that point home. We see this come up on exams all the time, shelf exam alert, where an individual will present with signs of mental illness, maybe even decompensation, usually in the community. However, upon further examination, further evaluation, it's revealed that within the context of their home culture, the behavior is normative. It is sanctioned. 60-40. 40% of the time, the question stem will ask the next best step, to which the medical student will answer, no further evaluation necessary. On the other hand, you might be asked to name the culturally sanctioned belief as well. The culturally sanctioned belief that happens to be in the film that I just mentioned as a reference is called hoodoo, right? So you might be asked a specific clinical term that is a description of the culturally sanctioned belief, or you might ask, there might be testing your knowledge that the behavior is normal, especially within the context of one's culture. Right? On the other hand, a culturally bound syndrome has similarities and differences to what we just described. Here, the focus is on the word syndrome, which means abnormal. So, similar to any culturally sanctioned belief, a culturally bound syndrome is also bound to a particular culture. And before the digital age, that usually meant some geographic locale. And on tests, it could still mean some geography. However, within that geographic locale, the behavior is considered to be abnormal. And in these cases, most often you're going to be asked what the name of that culturally bound syndrome is. There are tons of examples of culturally bound syndromes. One that comes up on exams very frequently is called AMOC, A-M-O-C, nope, A-M-O-K, to run amok. And the example there is in individuals with no prior history of violence or past psychiatric history, there is a spontaneous and rapid de-escalation towards violence. Right? That's amok. I believe that's Malaysia. On the other hand, Arctic hysteria, Piblokto, is an inclination towards running, screaming, and into the cold, into the freezing, and plunging one's head into the snow. That's Piblokto. And the reason why I bring both of these up is that both terms are actually, if not actually spoken, depicted in other Seinfeld episodes. I want to say Piblokto through Tor. I think we spoke about him a week or two ago. That's the heart attack episode. And Amok, I'm blanking on the episode, but the scene actually includes Newman. In the United States, quote unquote, going postal is a synonymous term. And there's a dialogue with Jerry, George, and the postal worker, Newman, about Amok. All right. Other characters. Seinfeld, the face painter. Everybody else.
We briefly touched upon the priest, right?
Yep.
Maybe George.
Maybe George. Always George.
Always.
Well, I need more conviction.
Always.
I know it's early in the morning, but what's going on with George in this episode?
He says I love you to the woman that he's seeing, and immediately, because it wasn't reciprocated, he becomes like certain that he was like rejected, and then maybe she didn't hear him. She did hear him.
Yeah, he goes with some off the ball. So, at first glance, completely normal. He says something that is not validated, and sometimes whether it's "I love you," whether it's you can fill in the blank there. There's this idea that I put myself out there and I was not validated or perhaps even ignored, and that could result in anxiety. Sure. But there might be more to it here with George. Again, remember, we start off with this idea that it's completely normal until proven otherwise. For those of you who have cheated and have watched all nine seasons of the situational comedy, you know that this is not an isolated circumstance. This is not an isolated incident, that George does this very often. So if there's more to it, where would we go with this? How about if George over time, I'm not so sure he does this, but what if over time he learns that it's better to never put myself out there? And if he does that for a year or two or a decade and never gets hurt, never gets embarrassed, never has happened to him what happens to him in this episode, well, that avoidance behavior can then be reinforced. Therefore, it could be strengthened, and he can actually develop personality traits along the lines of what did I just describe in terms of development? Yeah. Yeah, that's avoidant personality disorder, the credo that it's better never to have loved at all than to have loved and lost. Now, I'm not saying that George has avoidant personality disorder, but he has a single behavior that we can see, perhaps not in George Costanza, but in a person, in a generic person, especially when younger, how the avoidance of embarrassment can result in the strengthening of behavior. Behavior in this case would be those traits that constellate the definition of avoidant personality disorder. Avoidant personality is one of three personality disorders in a group published in the DSM. It's published under what are referred to as the cluster C personality disorders. It's a group of personality disorders that cluster or share common signs and symptoms. So what other two personality disorders share or overlap symptoms with the avoidant personality?
Disassociation, no.
So paranoid.
Obsessive compulsive personality disorder.
Obsessive compulsive personality disorder and
It's not antisocial, so no.
keep on going.
ADHD.
No, it's not a personality disorder. It's yeah. No? Going once? Nope, keep on going. You guys are gonna need more personalities, which is a great thought exercise anyway. Dependent personality disorder. The individual who meets the cardinal feature, the cardinal trait of needing validation or reassurance for every next step, right? What other characters you want to discuss here? I have time for one more. No, we're good. I got people shaking their head now. I'm being told to cut the feed. All right,
Okay.
perfect time to sign off. We will be back at noon to discuss the lighthearted romantic comedy called Insidious. So join us back then. See you about at 12.